So now we are going to begin a series of lectures doing reactions of various electrophiles with carbon-carbon triple bonds or alkynes instead of alkenes. But if you go back to your notes of alkenes, you're going to find uh, quite a list of similarities between the reagents of this chapter and the reagents of the alkene chapter. So if you don't yet understand the concepts of alkenes, you should go back and review those first. But just like we determined that the carbon-carbon triple bond, or sorry, double bond of an alkene, now the triple bond, they both contain carbon-carbon pi bonds, which are generally speaking nucleophilic. So we are still going to add a variety of electrophiles to that carbon-carbon triple bond nucleophile, where category A, once again, will be a strong acid. And those strong acids include things like HI, HBr, HCl, so strong hydrohalic acids, or sulfuric acid and water, equivalent to hydronium. And any strong acid is going to make a carbocation. In this case, it's going to be a vinyl cation, intermediate. During the mechanism